What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Cavalli coming at you, as always, with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes, who I have an incredibly difficult question for. But before I ask the incredibly difficult question, we need to ask the question everyone wants to know the answer to. Mr. Hughes, how the heck are you?
I'm hanging in, Dan. That's usually the harder question for me. I'm curious what you think is a more difficult question than how are you doing? Do you know how I love that question?
One, I'm doing fine. Thank you for not asking.
What's my hit rate on asking you how you're doing after you ask me? Is it like 5%?
Didn't we threw a curveball?
I'm not a good friend.
You did. No, you're a great friend. We had you do the intro once randomly. I don't know why. And you asked that time. So
that doesn't count.
I would say at least like 0.5% of asking.
Okay. I'm going to try to bring that number up. Just not today.
I'm doing okay. You know, I took a 2-week break from the gym and I have like 2 or 3 days left. And I'm starting to get, I mean, you know, we talked about this last week, but I'm starting to get a little, okay, like how do people not go to the gym like all the time? Like my body does feel better. Like it's obviously healed a lot of kind of just like these, not chronic, but just like soreness that I've had for years because I've never taken an extended break. But my God, I think my wife is ready to is like, all right, you need to get this MFer out of the house.
Get him away from me.
My difficult question for you though, Grant, and maybe it's not difficult, but I do think it's worth a discussion. Who is the second best team in the NBA? Assuming, and maybe we start here, I'm just going to default to the Boston Celtics until forever. I was kind of concerned about their defense for a minute. It's like, oh, now they're sixth. I know Jaylen Brown is injured, but what the fuck does it matter? Like they're just killing their offense is just a 5-alarm fire, a 5-alarm inferno. So I defer to them as the best team in the league because they don't have KP yet, and they're still arguably the best team in the league.
I think that's right. Although I was thinking about this the other day where, you know, and we'll get to them. There are some teams that, you know, look, Boston's numbers so far are just like, well, that's the best team. But like there are some teams that haven't proved what Boston has that are, there are arguments. We will make them and discuss them. But I find myself defaulting to like the cliche of, well, I just know that Boston can do it. And when we're talking about the best team in the league, it's like, well, who can win the championship? And just having seen Boston do it, okay, that gets benefit of the doubt. I wonder if that's right now, because we've had 6 years that you haven't had a repeat champion. So like apparently now having done it doesn't count for what it used to. And that's even, you know, the 6-year sample is small. So like, oh, am I overweighing that? I just wonder what you think about that. Like, do you do the same thing where you default to like, I have seen that happen, so I believe that it can happen again more readily than I can believe some of these other teams that haven't proved anything can get the first one. You know what I mean? Do you like, that's a weird fallback.
In recent years, ever since the Kevin Durant era Warriors, and maybe this is more to do with the landscape, I've kept more of an open mind when it comes to, I picked the Nuggets to win the championship the year they won the championship.
Right.
And I was scared to do it because this is the most popular podcast in the industry. And I knew people were going to get mad when they heard that take.
Yeah.
But I got to a point where, well, if you actually believe this, so I'm more open-minded to it. However, do you ever also, does this feeling of, well, I doubted, I'm going to use Boston as an example. I was skeptical of the offseason they had in 2023. I thought there'd be a playmaking deficit. I didn't trust KP's performance with Washington or his ability to stay healthy. So I came in inherently skeptical. I did not give them the due credit that they deserved at the time. And so I overcorrecting. Do you ever find yourself doing that for, well, I doubted them and they just ran roughshod over the entire year.
Don't do it again. Can't do it again.
So, I mean, that would dovetail nicely with this discussion anyway, because by asking who's the second best team in the NBA, even if you think that Boston's not the best team, well, then just apply this same discussion we're about to have then to this. And I do believe, and maybe I think coming in, the candidates for this would have been Minnesota, Dallas, and OKC as the primary candidates. Maybe some people would have said, could the Knicks sneak in there? Could the Sixers sneak in there? Spoiler alert, the Sixers cannot sneak in there. Can the Bucks sneak in there? Spoiler alert, they cannot. And so it feels like it was Dallas, Minnesota, and OKC, and maybe some people were holding out hope for Denver. I still think that the Dallas, Minnesota, OKC teams are the ones with some of the best cases, and that I do think OKC probably has the strongest. This is more so my way of directing us towards the Cleveland Cavaliers as Grant. They are the second best team in the East, right? You can't, they're one of 2 undefeated teams as we record this, number one, but 2, they're the only team in the league that's top 5 in offense and defense. And by the way, as a side note, Boston is coming to that. They're 6th in defense now to go along. I think they have the league's best offense at this moment. But before we sort of like dig into just the individual performances we've seen, particularly from their big four, do they have a case to, honestly, it seems like we're pitting them against OKC because Minnesota and Dallas, Dallas has had a somewhat weird start and I've somehow never been more confident in them, but it does feel like I would default to OKC. We just recorded an extensive segment on their defense. They're not at full strength yet. They don't have a backup big at the moment, and yet they're just have the best defense of all time. So I'm curious as to, before digging into the Cavaliers a little bit more, do you think that they have an actual case or worth a discussion relative to what we know OKC or, again, even Dallas, Minnesota can be?
I think they definitely do. I mean, and like kudos to, I know we both, I think we both viewed them as like, why can't they just be number 2 in the East before the season started? So like, I think they are in the discussion. But sort of like the reason this is an interesting topic is that they feel like a weird team to nominate for the quote unquote second best slot. Right. And I wonder why that, maybe that's, before we get into all the validating information to behind this point, like, what are the reasons that it seems weird to say, Cleveland, despite being 8-0, is actually the second best team? Like, what if any reservations do you have before we get into like, well, actually, here's why this might be the case?
Is it just, I don't know that I have any reservations other than I would make the case that OKC, when they have Hartenstein, is just going to be better and more dynamic. But our concerns about their offense in terms of, do they have enough shot creation outside of Shea? They've manifested a little bit. It's so early that it might not matter. And their half-court offense has ticked up since we last were talking about them. I honestly think that should be the only reason that, no, OKC is just, as the example, is just better. But do you think that the reservations at large are about what happened in Cleveland last season? By the way, they were injured and still almost won 50 games. Or is it, do people remember what they looked like in the playoffs that first season against the Knicks after having a great regular season? Or is it this idea that, well, they're still just a little lopsided because they have 2 bigs and they have 2 small guards. And so I'm not going to acknowledge, but we're not going to invest as much in how they're performing right now. We're inherently skeptical because of what we've seen. I honestly, it feels like the reason would be people are just remembering the 2023 playoffs. Like, well, this is how that ended, even after they looked great together. So why should we believe that they're at this level just below the Boston Celtics, or let alone at the level of the Boston Celtics?
Yeah, I think you played the hits there. I think the all of those reasons are like, they factor in some to some degree. I also think there's, and we can shoot them down, but there's the other things that give, I think, me and some other people pause as we discuss this, is like, well, this Cavs team just doesn't seem to have, there's no big wing, right? Like that's what everybody wants. There's no one in between the 2 small and the 2 big setup they have. So like, therefore you're just going to be at a disadvantage. And it's like, well, you have Evan Mobley that can guard anybody. And it's not like, okay, so the Jokic led Nuggets, like, who was their, elite 2-way wing? Like, they had role players there, like MPJ and I guess Aaron Gordon, not really a wing. And then I don't know, Murray's like, there's just they didn't have a superstar wing, right? So like, yeah, superstar, maybe 2-way is they definitely did have a 2-way wing and they don't anymore. But I think there's a lot of those lingering, questions, or like, I don't know, potential perceived frailties that like don't really apply anymore. And so, having said that, now I think we can get into like some of the numbers, or however you'd like to start discussing, why there is a case for the Cavs as number 2.
My goal then would be to convince you that they either have a better case than you thought, or that you're ready to pick them as the second best team in the. I want to convince myself.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I get accused of being a Thunder homer all the time by commenters, which is, I love it. I'm not gonna. I love it. Like that, to me, that's great. But so the biggest thing that has stood out to me, in terms of like the overall team performance, I already mentioned they're top 5 in offense and defense, and Boston is the only team that's really right now coming remotely close to joining that fray. But one of the things that stands out to me is that there are only 4 teams that are playing at a faster pace after opponent makes right now. That is up from 27th for Cleveland last season. And they did a good job varying the pace, especially during some of their staggered lineups or injury periods. So this is a team that is just, no, they're not the fastest team in the NBA, but they can play at all these different cadences. And so that stands out. I think I've struggled, and I'll be curious to see where you land on this. Individually, I think Darius Garland might be standing out to me more than Evan Mobley right now. And that's not to say Evan Mobley, there's been real growth there, but when you look at Darius Garland, he's shooting the 3-ball well, seems very comfortable working at the ball, but he's been super efficient. He's scoring 1.15 points out of the pick and roll right now. He's cut down on his turnovers a little bit, even though it feels like he has the ball less. That's still a good thing. You watch this guy on drives this year, he is just zipping past people. And that has been huge for his efficiency around the rim. He's up to 65% this year. He was at 59% last year, which was actually, I believe, above his career average. I would have to double check that though. And the other thing is just like the scoring in those situations, Grant. Out of everyone who's put in 50 points off drives this year, no one has as many assists as Darius Garland. And here is just the company he's keeping, where this is everyone who, as of right now, has scored at least 50 points and dished 15 assists off drives. There's Darius, SGA, Trey, and Ja. That's absurd company to keep when you're, yes, I do think Darius Garland is playing like how people would envision a floor general would play, but you have these other two options on the court in Donovan Mitchell, who's just your best from scratch creator, although that might be Ty Jerome because he's just getting buckets right now as well. When you also have Evan Mobley. And so the growth or improvement, however you want to frame it, for Darius Garland, I think he's been absolutely massive for this team because he's an outlet when he doesn't have the ball. And the stuff he's doing with the ball this year, it's smarter, it's more efficient, it's crisper. And to me, the biggest difference when I see him is, never mind like where the volume's at, the way he looks when he's attacking going downhill is just monstrous. And it doesn't matter what lineup it's in. It feels like, yeah, there's some lineups where there's more space, but he's just getting through traffic and getting by guys anyway right now.
Yeah, it's funny, like the path forward, or the path to Cleveland getting to where it sort of is now, had always been, at least among us, and I said it a million times, like, oh, Mobley just has to become their best player. Like that's how this happens, right? And like he's made strides. We that's been a real topic of discussion throughout the season. But the other way that like we don't really like, I don't know, consider as much because it's not as sexy to say, is like, what if like a couple of their, top 4 guys just get better? And it doesn't have to be like, oh, Mobley has to be transcendent. It can be Garland improves to this degree, which, by the way, like it's clearer than ever that he just wasn't right last year because it interrupted an upward trajectory that his career was like very clearly on. And now he's in his age 25 season and is doing exactly what you would hope a player that age with his, early career track record would do. So him leveling up a little bit, Jared Allen, super consistent, maybe even a little better this year. Mobley taking a small to moderate step forward, and Mitchell being fairly consistent, making 40% of his threes, all that stuff. Like it's Garland has been, to me, the most, I don't know, Mobley's been impressive, but like the Garland piece of it matters a ton because he's just giving them that second, like plus creator. Hopefully that holds up, because some of the drive stuff you mentioned is really interesting to me, because if you had a knock on Garland, I think in the past when healthy, it was that like he's just kind of too small and he can't get to all the passing angles he needs to on drives. Like, I guess that's not an issue anymore. I guess he's gotten that much quicker and seeing the floor that much better to where he's just like, he's a massive asset, like in an area that I had concerns about him, like nitpicky ones, because he's obviously really good, but like the passing in a crowd and like being able to make, Luka and LeBron can make insane passes in Jokic because they can just see angles and access angles smaller guys can't. For him to be doing what he's doing, driving the ball, is like hard to overstate how it's like profound of an impact that can have on an offense.
And it's made, I think, in combination with what Mobley is doing, it's made life easier on Donovan Mitchell, who still had his moments where it's okay, is he trying to do too much? But we saw this last year. Part of that was injuries, and we saw his role shift. He is better able to read what version of himself the Cavs need, I think, than ever before. And so when he's not responsible just in a vacuum for as much as the playmaking, he still has to generate a ton of his own shots. But like that's probably contributed to, he's played like in terms of a years long span, this is the best defensive version of Donovan Mitchell we've ever seen. And so I wonder how much of that, we talk about stamina as it's just like ethereal, but stamina matters. And so if he doesn't have to do theoretically as much as a passer in addition to scoring on offense, what is that going to do for him defensively? I would have to think it does quite a bit. And I think my only note on him, because he's largely the same player, is what I said before, whereas he's very good at toggling between existences by possession in a way that he wasn't in Utah because he was never really afforded that luxury. And it's kind of tough to overstate that, where it's, you mentioned this with Garland, the creation. We have not one, but two. Again, Ty Jerome has just been absolutely bonkers. Three, even Karis LeVert has been absolutely great. He feels, I don't know how much of that is playing with Kenny Atkinson. Do I expect him to shoot 1,000,000,000% on pull-up jumpers forever? No, absolutely not. But he is someone else who it's just like, he feels more plug and play than ever. And then if you look and it's, this team has real depth to it, to where Ty Jerome, this is the most outlandish stat I've seen this season. He just leads the league in points per possession out of the pick and roll, 1.52. I don't care how early it is. That's just absolutely nutso. And so this team has real depth to it. And I think Donovan Mitchell being able to fit very well, very comfortably into that larger context is a big deal. I don't think you and I ever had too many questions about that, but this is someone who is kind of each season, year over year, has maybe had to shift the way that he's played. And now he's just, to me, better. It's more of just an aesthetics or a feel thing where it's, he's just better at reading, not the game, but the game within the game of what the Cavs need from him in that moment, that night, whatever.
And I think for him, that's an especially valuable skill / development, whatever you want to call it, because I never got comfortable with the idea of Donovan Mitchell, best player on a championship team, like, conventionally, because it just, his defensive impact wasn't there. Like, he's undersized for that role. Great scorer, has like plenty of amazing playoff stretches. But I never quite got there where, like, all things being equal, can Donovan Mitchell be the best player on a title winner? I don't think he can, unless you have a team like this where there's like three other guys. It's kind of the Boston theory and some of the same questions that always applied to Jason Tatum, where, if you just have a conventional contender, Mitchell's probably not quite good enough. But if you have these other guys that make it so he doesn't have to be the be all end all every night, and he can sort of diagnose what's necessary from him, then that picture does clarify a little bit. And it sort of, that's the theory of this Cavs team, I think, maybe, which is a good thing to sort of focus on as we talk about them. Like, it can be any one of those four guys that can be the best player on the team that night. And it doesn't have to be, they're not going to live and die with Mitchell, because Garland might have a huge game, and they're not going to live and die with their offense if either of those guards are off, because Evan Mobley and Jared Allen are great they have all these, ways
you
to
get
win
by Mobley and then Jared Allen's just there.
Yeah.
It's vice versa. How does that?
Yeah. It's not like a true hierarchical, here's the alpha and here's, everybody on down the line. There's 2 to 3 guys every night that might just be making the biggest difference. And I think we view that a lot of times when talking about like championship equity as a negative, because you got to have the guy, but I don't view it as a negative in this instance.
If you have 4, what's better, having one top 10 player and then another top 50 player, or just having 4 top 40, top 30? I don't know where Jared Allen ranks in the hierarchy, even Mobley gets, but as of right now, the Cavs very clearly have at least 2 top 25 guys in the NBA, at least.
Yeah. And so far in the early going, just this season, it's like probably 3.
That leads me into the Evan Mobley discussion, where I've always been a little bit higher on his offense. I think even a lot of Cavs fans, I still would like to see him take more threes. He's at about 2 a game. He's been hitting them, but I don't want to say I didn't subscribe to the idea that featuring him more on offense meant you had to throw it down low, but I always thought is that what it meant? That was what I was most curious. What does it look like if you're giving Evan Mobley more agency over the offense? And this version of the Cavs, it has looked like, there's more of the grab and go, like the full length of the floor stuff, but it's just the face up stuff. He's gone from, so last year, Grant, he was at, I want to get this right, 5.6 drives per 36 minutes. He's up to 10.7 this year. And the big takeaway for me from that is he's shooting like 47% in those situations, which is, it's fine. He's not passing a ton out of those situations, but it inherently puts extra pressure on set defenses. And I think it's also showcased, and we've seen this even after he's setting screens. He is so much, I'd like to know if there was a measure of how much stronger he actually is, but he is so much because he doesn't necessarily look like like a lot stronger, but he is so much more comfortable, so much better at facing contact, going through contact, still being aggressive in spite of that contact. He's averaging 1.13 points per possession as the roll man. And again, we're seeing like this isn't a Cavs team. When you have him and Jared Allen on the court and he's your screener, like Jared Allen's kind of off to the side, and it in theory should make you easier to defend. He's had some tough finishes in those situations. So to have a career high mark in points per possession as the roll man, that to me has shown, and along with the drives, like this is someone who is more comfortable working within the confines of Cleveland's half-court offensive defense. They're going to collapse on him if he's going to face traffic never before. Now, I still think there are levels he needs to explore. The playmaking, like from the face-up spots, going downhill, making quicker decisions that way. I think he's capable of it. Will we ever see more of it? We'll have to see. But the minutes that he's like the staggering minutes where you're going to pair him with Derek, like they're just absolutely slaughtering people right now. And this is just a funny aside is Dean Wade didn't play the other night. So they started Isaac Okoro. They're starting 5 on the season, Grant. So it's those 4 plus Dean Wade. They have a negative net rating.
I was going to bring that up as like
in theory, Max Strus hasn't played yet. They haven't even peaked is my point. And it's not, Evan Mobley can continue to get better. Another fun aside too, Jared Allen leads this team in minutes per game. He's the only one averaging 30. So that's just, I don't expect that to hold all year, but so you're going to make it through the first, 10 games or so of the season where only one of your players has to average 30 minutes per game. Kevin Durant would kill to have teammates like that. I feel like at this point in the front court. So I look at this team, just the macro of it all. It's deep, it's functional depth. And yes, there will be they're not going to, if they go 82-0, I mean, congratulations. It's not happening. The reason I'm asking you now this question, this is where we mentioned the other teams. I don't have an answer. Which team is supposed to be the second best team in the East other than them? Like that discussion is no longer mentally stimulating for me. Mm-hmm. And I know Knicks fans will probably be, we need time to come together. The offense is still third, even though there's no depth there. This is why you should join our Discord. I don't know if you saw the message where I've just been sitting on a thought that I'm still not even ready to share like super publicly. There's going to come a time where I might be prepared to say some preposterously spicy things about where the Knicks are at, despite what some of the, because I don't think they've shown enough. And I feel confident saying this. You don't get to default the Knicks as the biggest threat to the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference. And you certainly can't say that. Is Philly even going to be healthy enough? What have you seen from Milwaukee that would make you want to pick Milwaukee? Orlando loses Paolo Banchero. The Miami Heat just have, I feel confident saying that they have zero identity. They have zero identity right now. The only answer is the Cavs. You don't get to talk me into any other team as of right now, which is why I'm asking you, like, would you be prepared? Like, how swayed are you now to say, you know what, they might be the second best team in the NBA? Or is it just, man, the Thunder exists, I can't get there?
No, I definitely, there is no counter argument if you're talking about today. I'd like, that's just, the stats are what they are. The Cavs are healthy. The depth is like shockingly good so far. Like everybody up and down, like Karis LeVert's making half his threes. Sam Merrill's making 39%. Okoro's they're all just like every George
Sam Merrill is invading Doc Rivers' sleep. Doc Rivers is thinking about it. Like Doc Rivers was mentioning Sam Merrill in a press conference.
I think like, cause I guess you would say, well, what part of Cleveland, like, do you not believe in? Like, we definitely believe in the defense. We just know that the defense is going to be great. And the offense, you have more questions about, but if Garland's going to play like this and Mobley is going to sustain this, like, moderate step forward, let alone, like, continue to expand his game, then you have Donovan Mitchell. Like, how bad is the offense going to be? There's not really, like, an obvious weakness. I still get hung up on, like, well, what if the Knicks, like, figure it out? You know, and in a playoff series, just having Brunson and, I'm hesitant to say that like the Cavs have the best chance to meet Boston in the conference finals, for example.
Okay.
But they're definitely going to have the number 2 seed, if not number 1. So like that helps, I'm 100% on board with at the moment and through these, first couple weeks and change. They've definitely been the second best team in the East and second best team in the league, potentially. OKC is still just, I don't know what to think about them.
The fair thing might be to say then that they, to me, Because I'm still picking OKC over them. Spoiler alert. I think the Cavs have been impressive, but it's going to be that I've seen more OKC's body of work, and it feels like they're leaving. There's more on the table from them than this might be close to the peak version of the Cavs, even with maybe I'm wrong, even without Max Strus. But you would have to really sell me hard on them not being the third best team in the league right now. And that's with Minnesota and Dallas. I'm super optimistic on still at the moment. I don't know. I don't even remember where we put Cleveland in our standings. I know we acknowledged they could be the second best team in the East. I don't think either of us predicted it.
Yeah.
Though.
You know, the thing, maybe this is what's making sense in my brain now that we've talked it through. It's like the Cavs, the best thing you can say if you're trying to be critical is, I don't know if what they're doing will sustain in the playoffs. Like, okay, sure. With teams like the Knicks and the other ones you mentioned, it's like they're not even doing anything well enough now for us to ask the question of, like, can that hold up in the playoffs? Yeah. Like, they haven't even reached the threshold of the Cavs where it's like, this is going great. So, okay, let's just see if they could keep it up. Nobody else has even gotten to the point where we ask, can they keep it up, other than Boston in the East? It's like, so the Knicks and the, whatever, Pacers, Magic, Sixers, Bucks, like on down the line, it's like, at least show us the first thing. At least show us that you have a theory of how this is going to work successfully, so we can then question it, like over a long stretch of games and postseason stuff. Like that's the differentiator so far to me, more than anything, is like we get it. Cavs are great. Just the only question is, can they continue to be? Nobody else is great.
I'm even wondering, and this isn't the best spot to be in, and we'll have to move on from here. We spend way too much time on the Cavs but who's the second best team in the NBA? Let us know in the comments if you're still listening or in our Discord. And if you're not in there, link to that's in the podcast and YouTube description. I would have questions about their offense, but they can stagger more. I think when I was looking, I think Mobley's played like half of his possessions alongside Jared Allen at this point. And so if you get into a point where the offense isn't persisting, like, you can play the heavily stagger card, and that might be I think they've done a good job playing those two together, but like Evan Mobley shooting 47% on twos right now when Jared Allen's on the floor. That's way lower than it was last year. But it's just like, oh, they still have this like they have more room to explore. But that would be the fair, I think, doubt is, does the offense, because by the way, Evan Mobley might just be the defensive player of the year right now. I know Wemby exists, and it's weird to say that with OKC kind of floating around, but that feels like more, if you had to pick the best, like the most valuable defender on OKC is Chet Holmgren, I guess the award would go to.
Yeah, probably.
But it's more of feels like a by committee thing because they're just like so small and scrappy and chaotic and frenetic as hell. So the Cavs as of right now were one of the like two or three, just 11 or maybe just one of the two 11 of or are they the only? Because we have qualms about OKC's offense. There's been some weird stuff with Boston at points, but they are one of the two or three teams that's just like no notes right now.
Yeah,
like, what are you supposed to pick at and be like, oh, this because what is not okay? Karis LeVert, Ty Jerome, who, by the way, 81% of Ty Jerome's buckets are going unassisted right now, and he's still shooting the hell out of it. Maybe those guys, their shot making pulls back, but like the Cavs have margin for error right now for that to happen and still just be fine.
Yep. No, there just aren't that many teams that are in a position like Cleveland where you just have to start looking for like, well, this will change for the worse, and that's why they're not good. They just have done everything you could ask to this point.
Which team did you want to talk about next on this edition of the Bounce Around, Mr. Hughes?
We're going to really go the other way a little bit here. I want to talk some Wizards. And this was, we were joking, trying to decide what to talk about today when we were texting, I guess, yesterday, the day before. And we were both thinking Wizards. So that's a problem, because groupthink is a terrible disease, but it feels necessary. And I want to couch this first in like Washington's 2-4. They got the worst defense in the league. They're 29th in net rating. Like this team is bad, but that's one, kind of the point, and two, the expectation given like where they are post Bradley Beal and finally turning into like a functional rebuild. So I want to start with the biggest difference maker on the team, which is Jordan Poole, Defensive Player of the Year candidate, who is hilariously averaging 4 stocks per game, which is like third in the league. That's insane. No, we're not going to talk about Jordan Poole. That's the last I'm going to mention him, probably.
Well, I mean, Jordan Poole he's been
better.
Turned a little bit of a corner at the end of last year, and it feels like most of that is just persisting.
Right. Yeah. No, he's been better. It would be difficult to be worse than he was for most of last year. But this is about the 3 rookies that are playing a ton and the second year player that like this core. I don't know. I've heard core 4 on the broadcast the other day, so I'm gonna just go with it. But it's Bilal Coulibaly. I'm gonna say I have been saying Coulibaly. Have you been saying Coulibaly?
I have.
It's Coulibaly, and that's just way harder to say, and I don't love it. But I'm gonna really try to get it to just make that
Coulibaly.
Coulibaly, like emphasis on the last syllable. So he's the most known of these 4 commodities, obviously, because he's got a year of experience. And he's the guy that we've kind of been in the bag for, really since he was barely into his rookie year, just because of the potential, the size, the sort of black box. Like, I don't know what's in there. What are we going to get? He's just, he's coming off now as we're recording this, his worst game of the year. He was 3-11 against the Warriors, still averaging almost 18 points a game, almost 6 boards, 2.5 assists, making 55% of his shots, 44% from deep, 80% of his free throws. That's a 67% true shooting percentage, which for him, for anybody, that's phenomenal. For a guy that you're like, oh, I don't know about the offense, like that's ridiculous at that level, at that volume. Despite that, he's still, to me, tell me what you think about this, a guy that like has so much room to expand what he's doing offensively, because his usage rate is like just under 18%. So he's just like not taking up a lot of possessions. It just the athleticism, the size, the flashes of like, oh my God, he can handle the ball in the pick and roll. He's become a better cutter. His spot up has improved dramatically. Like there's just so much unexplored territory with him. And that's really, I think that's where you start when you talk about the Wizards. There's these other guys we'll get into, but like, would you still view him as like, this is like the guy, if there is one at this early juncture for the Wizards?
I think I would. And part of that too is, and I don't think you mentioned this, is so you mentioned all just the offense that they've tapped into and maybe not tapped into just yet. And it's also, okay, now you go guard the best player on the other team. And
right. The defense is the given. I think that's well understood about him already.
It just the floor navigation on defense and the ability to just, he's someone who looks a little bit stronger, needs to continue to get stronger, but oh no, you go defend like smaller point of attack guards or just go guard these bigger power wings, and he's going to do it. And it's just, I know the Wizards defense isn't good. I think, what is it, 30th still in points allowed per possession? Yeah. I don't care, because when you watch him, it's, okay, am I going to predict defensive player of the year? No, but is this someone who can kind of be the infrastructure of your perimeter defense? I would say yes.
Yeah, and these can be noisy, but to that point, if you just break it down by time spent defending, his most common matchups this year in order are Trae Young, Jason Tatum, Jimmy Butler, Donovan Mitchell, and Steph Curry. Those are the top 5 guys. So these are tiny samples, right? But when you said like him against smaller guards, so far to me, that is where he is like an A+ difference maker. So Trae Young is 2 for 15 on the season when Coulibaly is designated as his primary defender. Steph is 1 of 7. Like his length and mobility against smaller guards is just death. So like if you're thinking of the theory of the Wizards longer term, you've got the guy that you can just throw at the primary creator. Like if it's a wing, sure, but if it's a smaller guard, I think he can just erase that guy, is what it's starting to look like. Now he's a second-year player, he's young, he's inconsistent, but the outlines of like, okay, this is how our defense will potentially be built. We got Alex Sarr behind him. We'll talk about him. It's looking like at least a very good shot blocker. Coulibaly can just be the guy that takes your best offensive player out of the game. And like, I don't know, that's a pretty powerful asset to have if you're trying to like put together a team and just imagine what all these, sub 21-year-olds are going to look like down the line.
I think most people would still default to that the guy has yet to be drafted. And that might be true given what this draft class is projected to look like. But to be here, and kind of like the overarching question we'll get to is whether the Washington Wizards are ahead of schedule. But to be here and like Coulibaly that's a real answer right now. And I actually don't think, maybe you and I haven't fully appreciated it, but I think writ large, this isn't fully appreciated in general. When you're talking to just anyone who follows the entire league, it's the Wizards are kind of still waiting on finding that person. And you had to really read into, I don't know that either of us, we would have said, okay, sure, he's their best chance at having that guy last year. I think now he might have reached the point you can actively just predict that there's a not insignificant chance that their best player of the future isn't someone they've yet to draft or that they've yet to acquire. Like, it might just be him.
And I think at the very, very least, you have, if you have watched him at all, you've got to say that guy's going to be a phenomenal role player on a really good team.
Yeah.
Like, that feels like, and that's immensely valuable too, right? Like, that having that kind of floor, forget the ceiling, which we both think is super high. That's you. So when you do get the guy, if you're of the mind that he's not there yet, Coulibaly just fits perfectly next to like whatever superstar guy you have not yet drafted or traded for or whatever. There's still three other guys, these three rookies they've got this year: Kyshawn George, Alex Sarr, and Bub Carrington. Just first of all, you love like how spread across the positional spectrum all those guys are. It just fits,
Right.
like none of these guys overlap with each other really at all, and they have such differing skill sets. I mean, we can go in any order. I think George is probably the least known and has so far been the least productive, probably.
And
He's
I
really
still
had like
watch him, and I'm like, he's got it. I
he's
don't know.
got
Like,
it.
there's more ball skills to him, more
Yeah.
physicality to him than I thought. I think the shots will eventually start to fall, and he's another guy that's been competing on defense, where clearly doesn't have the ceiling for them, ceiling that Bilal Coulibaly does on the defensive end. But he's just someone who feels, when you talk about who's going to be a superstar role player, this is someone who feels, and look, we're getting ahead of our skis here because he's fewer than 10 games into his career. But he feels so plug and play and is going to be able to do like jack of all trades, master of none type shit. And that as your fourth or fifth starter at some point. And I don't like saying injuries were a blessing in disguise, but they don't have to, but they've been starting him ever since the Kyle Kuzma groin injury. And I don't know if he's going to give that spot back.
I mean, I had the same thought of like, well, man, I guess you better just trade Kuzma now, because I don't know that you're going to, I mean, like, George has had 1.5 good games, I would say, so far. Like, just statistically, like, he had his 20-pointer against the Warriors. That was Washington's last game as we're recording this. Draymond Green talked about him and all the other young guys after the fact and was like, they got our respect because George was just going at him, and like both competitively and like verbally. Not always the best idea, but I mean, for a rookie,
I fave it.
I'm on board. Like, you're the Washington Wizards. You have been a laughing stock for like quite some time. Talk your talk. Like, I think that's a positive. But you said it. Like, the numbers aren't really there. He's averaging like 8 points, 4 boards, a couple assists. The shooting's been terrible, all in all. But he did, got up 17 threes against the Warriors, made 6 of them. There were 5 in a row that went down. Just the feel is there, the versatility, the positional size you want, just all that stuff is really there for him. It is
the
like
hair. So I forget about that.
It's a deeper
together.
cut, right? We started with a deeper cut, so we should move to. Do you want to talk about Sarr or Carrington? Pick your poison.
Let's talk. I have stronger thoughts about Carrington to this point.
Oh,
so let's go with Sarr.
So Sarr, to me, having watched a lot of tape in the last few days and just kind of marrying that with the pre-draft scouting reports and what we saw, the real lows of the preseason and summer league and stuff. Statistically, I do feel confident that he's just going to block shots. 5.3% block rate. That's 97th percentile among bigs. He's blocked at least 2 shots in every game in his career. That's for like, short career, but getting a couple blocks a game is never an accident.
Right.
I think the most interesting thing to me in terms of like, what is this guy going to be, is that Washington is clearly viewing him as a center so far. 86% of
by the way, it didn't seem like they were going to do.
No. Why is Valanciunas on like that? That was the takeaway, was like, oh, I guess they think Sarr's a 4, or they don't, or he's not ready yet. So he may not be ready, but Washington's defense has been a fraction above league average with Sarr at center. So that's like, if you're looking for encouraging signs, that's a big one. Small sample, caveats apply, obviously. It seems as if he's going to be a stretch 5. Part of that's because half his shots have been from deep this year, but he's making 20% of them. So not great. But I do think, to just paint a full picture, he's pretty limited as a finisher. And like, I don't love the hands. He doesn't elevate a ton inside. He's very easy to move still. Like, some of that will change as he fills out. But like, it does feel, if I had to guess, he seems like a floor stretching 5 that can block shots and maybe be like a grab and go guy off of rebounds, like that kind of thing. I don't know that he's going to be a pick and roll finisher with any real volume. It's so early, but just like, that's kind of my read on it. And that's all to say, if you're going to make, he's definitely going to shoot them, but if you're going to make threes and block shots and be like pretty mobile, that's going to work. I think. I don't know that there's anything close to stardom in there, but just looking at how he's moved around the floor, some of the strengths and weaknesses, I think he's a starter down the line. And I think like he could have some real pluses. I don't know how you feel about him, but I think I'm frankly like a little bit more optimistic than I was on draft night.
I think I'm probably still skeptical about what he's going to be offensively.
He's got to make shots. That's a big one.
And if he's not going to do that, then you're going to have to streamline what he's doing even more. And then that becomes all right, we have to surround him with as much spacing as possible so we can open up his volume at the rim. He is shooting like 69% inside 3 feet, which I think is fine as a rookie. But I guess I get the concept of him on offense. I just don't know what it's going to turn into. I have been very impressed, aside from block rate and just like overall defense. He's a lot more physical than I thought he was going to be able to be. Like, he's not going to be the best rebounding big, but I thought he's fought on the glass a lot better and fared a lot better against some guys that are just stronger and bigger than him in general right now. And again, that in tandem with my preconception coming in was, they're not going to treat him as a center, and they've given him the latitude to be that. And I think that that's ultimately going to be really good for his development. I'm higher on him than I was coming into the regular season, but he's still such, and not necessarily in the good way. Like, he's an uncomfortable mystery box to me on the offensive end.
I think that's right. And I would say too, like, we got to just, this is more for, I'm not saying you do this, but you got to just get off the idea that he was the number 2 pick. Like, we just have to, like, that just can't be part of the calculus, because that's always going to set him up to be viewed kind of unfairly. Like, he just, that's where he was in this class, and it's defensible. Like, taking him there remains defensible. I think not far from a no-brainer, but yeah, I think I'd just leave it at, I'm with you. Like, I'm encouraged. I'm not like, I'm sold on Coulibaly. I'm encouraged by Sarr. I'd say, and George for sure. So the last guy, Bub Carrington. I don't know, the primary return in the legendary Denny Avdia trade. Can we refer to him as that now?
I guess. What is that 2029 pick going to become? It's not going to be a future Hall of Famer, probably, like Bub, right?
So 10 points, just under 5 assists, 4 boards. Nothing spectacular shooting split wise. Just under 44%, 35% from deep, making all his free throws, 93% there. With him, it's just the craft, I feel like, which just jumps out if you're watching him, getting to spots, just having great feel, like in traffic. Now the knocks might be like, he's a little too reliant on like basically bad shots or like tough shot, like mid-rangers, these pull-ups, these floaters and stuff. But just like, he's a little bit like George in the like passing the eye test thing, where just as a pick and roll ball handler, you can just see like his ability to manipulate space and opponents. And just like, it just feels like, okay, that guy has an idea. And a lot of that's real, like, it's natural, I think. And you don't teach a lot of that stuff. Like, I remember thinking this about D'Angelo Russell many, many years ago. Like, someone asked me, this is a deep cut. When the Lakers had him and Clarkson the first time, it's like, who do you like better? And I was like, I just think Russell understands what to do, like in a pick and roll. And so I like him better. I don't want to just compare Bub Carrington to Russell, but the same kind of, like, he's not rushed. He can get the guy on his back. He can just make the pocket pass. He can pull up when you're supposed to. Like, it's just kind of there. And I think that's my main takeaway, is that he just looks like a player that has an idea of what he wants to do and can do it, like, already.
Who was the name you invoked at the top of that you compared him to before you went to D'Angelo Russell?
Carrington?
Yeah. Didn't you mention another name?
Well, it was when people were comparing, like, is Jordan Clarkson or D'Angelo Russell the better long-term prospect?
Oh, well, so mine's probably been a little bit spicier. When I watch him, I kind of think, well, like, what if you just added or like stretched out 3 or 4 inches of Chris Paul?
Oh, wow.
And the ability, I mean, you mentioned the stuff about getting defenders on your back hip. I think his vision is, I know he's bigger, so it's not, he's not the expert manipulator that Chris Paul is, but he kind of knows that. He's listed at 6'4", by the way, and I call bullshit. Like, this is someone who feels like he's 6'5" or 6'6".
He seems bigger, right? Like, he plays bigger than that.
So that patience, maintaining your dribble in traffic, and just even the shot profile a little bit, where it's not getting to the rim a ton. He'll take some threes, but not a ton. But he's trying to get to that pull-up midi. We'll see if the floater, I think he's like 1 of 4, 1 or 5 on floaters will start to fall. But he looks comfortable, and he doesn't also seem like he's seeking it out. It's, well, there's space. I'm going to dribble into it and take it. But I look at the composure, the poise of maintaining his dribble, and I can't help but think this is someone who's going to drive like hyper-efficient offenses someday. Now, I'm not going to predict that he's following the Chris Paul arc, but I'm just thinking about, so is there a chance that, so we've just named four players who are in their second season or less, 3 rookies and 1 sophomore, and Bilal Coulibaly. If you ask me to give the over-under on 2.5 of those guys being long-term starters on a good team, I'm just to smash the over right now. Is this early season Kool-Aid? Is it what? And maybe this, and I don't know if you view Carrington in that vein, of the sense, do you view him as someone who can kind of drive an entire offense in that regard?
I think 3-point shooting will just be the swing skill. I think if he can turn some of those pull-ups, just trade some of the 2s for 3s, some of the 2-point jumpers for 3s. I think then it's like, well, I don't have any notes about him, like, offensively, if he can do that. So less than 10 games into his career, and he's this effective already, and you can just see the like outlines of what this might progress into. I think he could be that guy. I think like Coulibaly, I'm more convinced than ever he's going to be a star. I think Carrington is probably the guy you'd pick second in terms of like, what could he, like, how big of an impact could he have if he hits like the top range of his possible outcomes?
And he's at 55% or 54% of his pull-up 2s. And so I've actually kind of had the same thought, where he's shooting fine off the catch from 3, but he's not taking a ton of them. We've seen it from Chris Paul. We're like, okay, Chris Paul had more of that like daring do off the dribble. Like, he really wanted to humiliate you. And I don't think Carrington has that type of handle or will ever be in that position. But remember how Chris Paul just kind of methodically dribbling into those pull-up 3s that he would hit, maybe like Rockets era Chris Paul or Clippers era Chris Paul. That seems like something Carrington could do. And I feel like I'm running too far afield with the Chris Paul.
Well, no, I mean, it's early. You could do whatever you want. I would say too, we've focused mainly on offense here, I guess, with the exception of Sarr and some Coulibaly talk. Like, I think another positive, now the numbers just are what they are. This is the worst defense in the league. We've said it several times. All 4 of these guys compete. They're all like interested in defense. It's not, and that's hard to do on a team that's going to be bad, is to, and it's early, maybe that changes, but like, the bad defense is more stemming from like mistakes, as opposed to just like malaise or lack of commitment or whatever. Like, I do think eventually all 4 of these guys can be plus defenders. They all have good positional size. They all like have some
Bub is a
athleticism,
rebounder too.
length,
Like, he's just in there grabbing boards. Yeah.
All these guys, I think, have like, you can envision Washington being a good defense, and these guys all having certainly Sarr, that's like what he's hanging his hat on at this point, but like, they can be a part of a good defense. I feel pretty confident down the line.
So do we think the Wizards are ahead of schedule? Like, their rebuild started last summer.
Yeah.
So we've had 1 season plus fewer than 10 games into their rebuild. They are still one of the worst teams in the league. They want to be one of the worst teams in the league. And I think there are going to be rougher patches. Rookies might hit a wall when they're not used to playing this much. Bilal Coulibaly is going to go through some tough stretches. We have questions. Even Bilal Coulibaly, who I'm highest on, what is the level of self-creation that he can actually shoulder down the line?
Yeah.
But where do you view their rebuild relative to where you thought it would be or should be, based on when and even how they started? Because look, that Bradley Beal trade, it was more about just ripping off the Band-Aid. Like, they didn't put anything or any asset in place, unless you were really that high on Jordan Poole, to say, okay, like, this is something that's no, that was more about ripping off the Band-Aid. None of these guys are like the product of that trade. So where do you just kind of like, how do you feel about their rebuild relative to how and when they started?
I think you've got to say it's further along than expected, just because all 4 of those guys we talked about, sure, it's fair if you want to say, to circle back, well, they don't have the guy yet that's going to be the best player on the next good version of this team. I mean, maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. But like, they've got these 4 guys who all sort of fit together. And the pick situation, they owe that 25 to the Knicks with top 10 protections, and it's top 8. And then, I mean, like, maybe that probably not going to convey. And then they've got the latter half of the decade. They've got all the Phoenix swaps coming in and all that other stuff. Like, so I think it's possible that because of what they have now, which like, again, this may change in 2 months when they still have 2 wins or something. And like, it looks rough, but like what they have now, plus their flexibility going forward, their ability to trade veterans for more draft assets. It's like, for this being the first full year of the rebuild, because you can't really call last year that because they were just starting.
Yeah.
I mean, like, or maybe, I don't know, maybe you can, but like they're further along, I think, than you would expect. And that's because they seem to have kind of hit on all 4 of these guys more than anything else.
Is it weird that, I guess because it's more about draft position though, and you told us to throw that out the window, it feels like Sarr is still sort of the biggest of like, oh, was that the right pick?
Well, yeah. I mean, the other thing I'd say too is they're different from, like, take Portland, right? Portland has, half the roster is older and they need to trade him, and we're not sure about Scoot.
Hey,
And then
that's
like
a top 12 defense you're disparaging right now.
yeah,
In Portland.
Utah doesn't have the guy. I don't know where else you want. Detroit, like, yeah, Cade Cunningham's better than anybody Washington has, but I think maybe the thing about the Wizards rebuild that's so appealing is it's so clean. It's just like they got their picks. They've got these 4 guys, and you kind of have a shotgun approach. Like maybe 2 of them become great. It's just there's no complicating factors, right?
And yeah, no one's rushing them
Yeah.
either. To where I think Utah and Portland, Utah specifically, because they have all those picks and Lowry, it's if they're not they don't have the guy, they need to go out and trade for the guy. And even with Portland, it's you have all these. We called them stacked. We knew they were going to be bad, but they are kind of stacked. When you look at the roster, they need to hold this fire sale, or they could make a consolidation trade. Washington's not up against that, and it's not. I mean, Portland and Utah been in their rebuilds longer. Portland's feels longer because those like latter Dame years were just aimless. But Utah's like, okay, they're in the 3rd season of the rebuild, and it's like, so Washington's in its 2nd. They're not light years behind. So yeah, I think they're ahead. For me, I don't think I would have predicted we're sitting here in the onset stages of year 2 and like, man, they might have like 3 or 4 guys who are just going to be part of the next really good team.
Yep. Yeah. No, I mean, really, again, 2 and 4, worst defense in the league. It's like they're bad. They've been bad. They're going to be bad, and like that's fine. It's totally okay because they've got what look like some pretty promising guys in there.
East Coast bias continues. I don't necessarily want to spend a ton of time on this team because they have 2 players who are injured that are pretty important to what they do. So I'm going to ask you, before we go into the performance of this squad and 2 individuals who are standing the F out, Grant, are the Toronto Raptors the fun kind of bad?
Are they the fun kind of bad? Well, they're way more interesting than I thought they would be so I guess that's fun. And at least, I don't know. Did they pick this direction to trot out an old Toronto criticism? Or is this like what's just happened because of injuries? But a lot of positive signs, like big to small. I presume you want to start with RJ Barrett being the best passer on planet Earth.
Yeah, 7.8 assists per game. He hasn't played a ton of games because he began the season injured. But you look at what he's been able to do, and it's okay. The pocket passes seem smoother. They're smarter. His floor awareness is just better in transition. Like, this feels like a real, like, actual legitimate playmaking jump from him. And we'll see how it sustains when both Scotty and Emmanuel Quickly, who have both been absent, are inside the lineup. But it doesn't sound, we know Scotty's out for a while. It doesn't necessarily sound like IQ's about to make his debut. But I think RJ, he's facing more defensive pressure, more double teams, and his decision-making out of those has gotten better. Now, some of the trade-off has been, all right, his efficiency at the rim has slipped, but like, he is still creating chaos, going downhill on drives, getting out in transition in general. The other thing that I think makes them fun, RJ's a part of this, Gradey Dick's a part of this. They're just, they're running in general. I think they have the 5th fastest average possession time in the league. No one's going faster after defensive rebounds. They just grab a defensive rebound and there's an outlet pass, so they're just going. And so that, to me, makes them, that's the fun kind of bad. But they've had some close games where it's, they beat the Nuggets so that we can record the Blow It Up Denver podcast that everyone seems like they've been waiting on. RJ's been a huge part of that since coming back. I think he's in under Darko Rajakovic, the way that Darko's using him. I honestly think that he might get even better. The playmaking will slip, to be clear, when IQ and Scotty Barnes are there. But just having to imagine him like being able to spend even more time off the ball, getting him moving there, I would expect the efficiency at the rim to climb back up. He still is shooting 39% from 3. And so it's, do we have to wait a while before we call this a new normal? But he did okay, or he did better than okay from 3 in Toronto last year. I think he's going to kind of settle into maybe his ideal role with Toronto, where it's, we're going to get you the ball when you're leading these bench lineups that we now believe that you can lead because of our play style combined with your growth as a playmaker and your off ball movement. He continues to turn my head. Again, even as some of the inside the arc efficiency is waning, the mindset, the aesthetics, just the functionality of his game right now, to me, just looks and makes way more sense than it ever did in New York.
What do you think is what are the most and least surprising parts of his development viewed through, like, here's what he was as a Knick? Like, having watched him with the Knicks, like, maybe just speak for Knicks fans or in your own personal opinion, like, what is he doing now that, like, what is he doing really well now that you could have said, oh yeah, I could have seen that coming? And then what could you have just, oh my God, where did this come from?
So the thing that I'm wondering where it kind of came from is, and I don't know how much of this, the playmaking, I want to know where it came from, because this is just someone who is dishing out assists in all sorts. Like, the spacing in Toronto isn't pristine. And so I could talk about the floor balance that the Knicks gave him. And that's where I kind of look like some of the stuff he is doing in transition, his ability to get moving off the ball. The Knicks never tapped into that adequately. But the passing, where like this is shit that's happening in traffic or in slowed down sets, that's even during some of the bench units he was a part of that were just ripping opponents. Never something I necessarily envisioned for him. So that's the thing I'm looking at, and I'm almost waiting for it to come down, because there's no way it's going to sustain. But it's not, I mean, not turning the ball over a ton. Even like the Raptors do turn the ball over, but he's not necessarily the meat and potatoes of those struggles. I don't think he's an 8 assist per game guy, but when he is like the central focus and he's still able to dish those kinds of assists on a Raptors team, yeah, they've been about league average offensively, but Grant, you look at the talent remaining without Scotty or Emmanuel, like Jamal Shed, Donovan Mitchell, like, it's just like who are you? Jonathan Mobo? Like, I just, like, who is supposed? Yes, Jakob Poeltl is definitely an above average offensive center. I want to make that clear. I think he ties in a lot of, possessions together nicely, but you're talking about like Agbaji's playing over 30 minutes per game. But like, this isn't a team that you would look at and say, oh, they're supposed to be average or better offensively right now. And they are. So that stood out to me. Unless you have any thoughts on him, I have another player that I think we need to get to.
Well, I know who you're going to go to. I want to, you mentioned both of them. I think Mobo and Shed have both been like, they're bit players, but like Mobo's disruption defensively and his mobility and his grab and go stuff. Like, I think I was looking this up the other day. So he's only played like 120 minutes, I think. And he has more deflections than anyone who has played that many minutes or fewer. So he's just like messing stuff up in the best way. And Shed, I think, just looks like a kind of a pro ready. I don't know where he'll fit on a depth chart ultimately, but like both of those guys have had like actual impacts, which is not something you would have expected from a couple rookies this early. But please let us move to the second year guy that
I will say, Mobo, disruptive is the word, just to absolutely use him. With Shed, I still think that the jumper, the 3-point shooting, and like in particular, is going to wind up being the swing skill for him. That dude just defends his ass off. And so if you could just get to a point where you have the spacing necessary and you want him to kind of get going downhill, I'm like, all right, that's fine with me. Like, I don't have an issue with that. So he is not someone I knew a ton about other than the defensive reputation coming out of college, but just the energy that he is going to play with. And I still think like he's made some nice passes out of drives. And is he ever going to shoot a little better on those drives? We'll have to see. We got to talk about Gradey Dick, though, who is already averaging over 20 points per game. He's entered the most improved player discussions, whether you want to throw sophomores in there. Well, I guess very quickly, do you think RJ has a case for that as of right now? We're fewer than 10 games into the season, or is that just all right? Like, this is more a matter of opportunity than growth that I've seen.
I mean, if he's up over 7 assists for like any length of this season, that is officially like a new skill, and we very much enjoy the new skill in the most improved player discussion. So yeah, I mean, I think Gradey Dick has like the more complete case just because all the numbers are up and his role is like, I don't know, 10x in terms of importance what it used to be as a rookie. But yeah, like, I mean, that's if RJ Barrett is a primary facilitator, I don't know what to do about this. I don't know what has happened. But let's talk about Gradey Dick.
Yeah, so I want everyone who is watching or listening to raise their hand if they saw Gradey Dick opening the year putting up 20 plus points per game. Now, for all of you who put your hand up, thank you for admitting that you're big fat liars. This is just like, he's not even doing it in the way you would have predicted. The 3-point percentage is like, it's ticked up. I think he's over 37% now. He wasn't making them at this absurd clip. He's done so much damage inside the arc, and the way he's doing it, like the level of difficulty that are on his shots is bonkers. Steph Curry, Grant, is the only player coming off screens, finishing possessions off screens more often per game than Gradey Dick. That's just, I mean, by the way, kudos to Darko for putting him in that situation, but that's just absolutely absurd. The stuff he's doing inside the arc, Caitlin Cooper had this nutso stat, Grant, 71% of Grady's shots have been heavily contested, which ranks 15th among the 26 players who have attempted at least 100 shots. He leads the entire league in screens as the off-ball cutter with 133. Among the 23 players who have seen at least 50 closeouts, Gradey ranks third in points per chance at 1.19. That's actually the part of his game. I know people have talked about the contested jumpers. What he's doing against closeouts, oh yeah, my God. Grant, he's shooting over 60% on drives, but the thing that is melting my brain, and I didn't see this last year, I saw some of the escapism stuff. We talked about it with Samson Folk. I think you and I talked about it in a podcast. The dude is like physical. Like he can finish through contract. He can be at these weird angles. He's getting fouled more than 17% of the time on his drives right now. Do you know how insane to be shooting 60% on drives and getting fouled 17% of the time? I don't fucking care how early in the season it is right now. This is someone who we've kind of seen moments of like, okay, can he do a little bit more passing here? This is someone who is far more complex offensively than we ever could have predicted. And the final thing before I throw it to you, I did talk about this with Samson, and someone told me to watch this. This was coming out of the draft, that Gradey Dick could be a good team defender. I'm not saying he's there, but I am there to where it's all right. Like I see it. Like he's made a lot of good off-ball plays, and he's going to be targeted on ball, and we've seen it.
Yeah.
But like he's also had these moments where, did you see the possession? It was overtime against the Kings where he just locks down De'Aaron Fox. Like, doesn't lock him down, but like pokes the ball away while staying in front of him, step for step. Now, does that say more about, are you concerned about what De'Aaron Fox's like blow by speed is right now? I don't fucking know. But this is someone, I can't put him in the MIP discussion right now because me and sophomores, you know how my brain just goes back and forth with that stuff. J-Dub broke it last year. Like he completely fried my brain. Him and then De'Aaron Fox a few years ago. The Gradey Dick bandwagon is officially running out of room because people, I promise this is the final thing. This isn't just like Raptors or someone trying to do their, like people just understand right now, if you're a casual basketball fan, Gradey Dick is lighting it up and he's not doing it as a 3-point shooter necessarily.
That really is my ultimate takeaway, is that like he just, and I do think you heard throughout the draft process and even last year that like from people that knew, this wasn't the majority take, I don't think. People would say like he's not early Duncan Robinson. He's actually kind of more like late Duncan Robinson, who can suddenly put the ball on the floor and like do stuff with it. You know what I mean? Like that, he really is just more than, he's not just a spot up guy that you maybe run off screens and he shoots threes and you hide him on defense. Like he's I mean, him coming off screen, the Heat, the Raptors actually do like create a lot of chaos by just running him around and using him as a screener too. By the way, that's like you should use really good shooters as screeners, that because of all the I don't know problems that causes. So yeah, he's just more than a guy that's gonna he might average 8-9 points a game, get up a couple threes, and just hopefully you play the matchups right and he doesn't get cooked on. No. Like he's doing stuff with the ball. He's had these like that reverse layup the other night, and he had that weird. I love his little strange hanging scoops that he like. There's real, like I wouldn't go so far as to say Gradey Dick has like is in his bag. Like he has, he's gonna just kick everybody off the dribble or whatever. But you have to close out hard. You have to stay attached, and then he's really good, or way better than anyone gave him credit for, at exploiting the way you have to guard him because he is a good shooter. And that's allowed him to just show that like he's so much more than just a guy who's going to catch and shoot.
Well, actually, I want to just circle back to this. So he's attempted 16 free throws coming off of his, like as the result of his drives. Here's everyone in the league currently who has attempted as many or more free throws while shooting 60% on drives. De'Aaron Fox, Giannis, and Jason Tatum. But I was trying to think, do you have a comp for him? Because Darko, by the way, he compared RJ Barrett to Manu Ginobili the other night. I didn't hate it. He made it very clear he wasn't talking about necessarily as a usage, but as some of like the idiosyncrasies in his game. And I was like, I don't hate this. I was trying to think of Gradey Dick, and I just see all these people. They did it before, and they're throwing out like all the Caucasian like dudes who can shoot.
Comp has to be a white guy,
right? I think I was listening to a Raptors Republic podcast. They made a joke that some people have been comparing him to Mike Miller. I can't think of it. None of the comps do it for me. Like, I'm just trying to think. I'm not saying he's gonna be better than all of these guys, but just the stuff that he is able to do physically off closeouts and some of the finishes he's had, I can't. And knowing what he then does is like this sort of super threat away from the ball, I don't have a good comp for him anymore. I just don't. Not that I had one to begin with.
Yeah, I'm really struggling. I feel like it shouldn't be that hard to comp with somebody. Well, get your Gradey Dick comps in the comments, please. Let us lead us the right way on this.
You know who the one guy that sprang to mind, and I don't
Chandler
love it.
Parsons.
No. It
Bobby
was actually
Sura.
Cam Johnson. I just don't know if he has.
I think he's got more. I think he's got more off the dribble than Cam, like by a lot.
That's what it is. Is that because Cam Johnson? I feel like we've seen the moments of it, but like these are now extended flashes of this. So I don't know. If you have a good comp for Gradey Dick, let us know. Please, we love Dick comps around this part.
All right, I got one more guy I want to talk about if we're through with the Raptors.
Yeah, we're done. Though they are, well, to close it, they are the fun kind of bad, right? They're just like, you're kind of, there are guys who are performing you didn't expect to. There's real meaningful stuff to take away from it. And well, look, Kelly Olynyk hasn't even played this season yet. And Bruce Brown's still wearing cowboy hats on the sideline. So let's see what this team turns into.
Yeah. And also root for injuries, but having a couple of key guys out, you're going to bank some of those losses and let these other fun players, explore the space a little bit. That's kind of a win-win.
Or do you trade them and rebuild around Gradey Dick and RJ Barrett?
Wow, that's you're saying the quiet part loud now. That's really clearly the way to go. We're going to stay in the Eastern Conference. I just want to talk about Jaden Ivey. I think coming into this season, for me at least, he was one of the most interesting, like maybe just say X factor or sort of unknowns, guys that depending on how they did or did not develop could really have an outsized impact on like what their franchise does in the biggest sense going forward, and to synthesize it, it's like, is he the guy that we can have next to Cade Cunningham? And I think so far the indications are like, actually, yeah, it's starting to look quite a bit like that. So just the basics, averaging 19.6 points, 4.5 boards, 3.6 assists, 46.7% from the field, 39% from three, making about 3/4 of his free throws. Nothing crazy there. His 3-point attempt volume is basically unchanged, and has stuck around like between 7.4 and 8 per 100 for his career. So it's not like these gains are in 3-point volume. It's 3-point accuracy. It's specifically catch and shoot accuracy, which I would argue if you're looking for the skill that you need him to have next to Cade Cunningham and with this roster that skews away from shooting, at least with Sarr Thompson once he's back and Ron Holland, like that's the one. You've got to make enough catch and shoot threes to keep defenses honest. And this is the other key. It's related to just unlock what he can do as a second side attacker, which is where he's just, that's where Jaden Ivey looks special. Like that's where you can see, oh, here's how he was drafted this high. Because when he's downhill and just is able to take off or slither around guys, there's not a lot of players that can do what he does athletically going to the basket. And as a result of him making a ton of his catch and shoot threes, he's hitting getting half of his shots at the rim because he's got to be honored as a shooter. And he's just gotten better at picking his spots and when to attack. His previous career high was 35% of his shots came at the rim. So like pretty substantial change for him and in the best way. His drives per game aren't actually any higher. He's just finishing better at the rim and he's finding other ways to get there. So it's just like the steps we've seen from him. I think if you're a Pistons fan, it's almost like it's like a relieved exhale, I think is like the correct reaction, because you have now some pretty good early season evidence that, okay, this isn't going to be a wasted pick. We're not going to have to start thinking about trading Jaden Ivey or like asking, figuring out like who can be that guy. Because like, I'm not saying he's going to be a superstar, but all the things he's doing this year make sense as a 1B or 2 next to Cade Cunningham in ways they didn't before.
Yeah, I mean, he's looked really good this year. Just even you mentioned the off-ball shooting, but the way that he's kind of moved off the ball at points as well. I guess not to focus on the negative, my biggest question for him moving forward would be, you kind of mentioned, what does he look like in some of the tougher spacing lineups if a Sarr Thompson comes back and you ever want to play all their young guys together? I am curious, and this isn't as huge of a problem because Cade is there, and even like Sarr Thompson and Ron Holland are notable because of their passing abilities. I don't know what to make of him as a playmaker just yet. I would at least like to see him be able to find guys in more of those second side situations or just coming out of drives. Even as we're recording right now, he has more turnovers on drives than assists. That might be more of a mindset thing. A lot of the Pistons teammates are new. Defenses still don't necessarily like, they have better spacing, but are these all shooters that defenses respect? Depends on the defense that you're going up. I honestly, I'm saying this with genuine curiosity. I'm curious to see what he turns into as a playmaker. And you don't need him to be the floor general with Cade Cunningham there, but if you want him to lead second units or just be even more of a dynamic threat in your full strength lineups, is can he get off the ball a little bit more quickly?
I think it's in there. I would concede though that like the name that comes to mind for both good and ill when he's attacking is Russell Westbrook, and like obviously nobody is as athletic like what like peak Westbrook was, but Ivy does have those bursts where it's like, is he at a different speed than everybody else? Like it really does. It's glitchy almost, but he also has the thing where like the ball just squirts out, or like he's gets contact and the ball just pings around, and so it's like those are maybe it's an issue of throttle back to like 95% instead of 100. And then maybe we cut some of those turnovers. Cause he does just like get downhill and it turns into a blur and the ball just doesn't get where it needs to go. I still think, I don't know that he's going to be ever. You're like, he's going to run 30 pick and rolls a game and just, dissect a defense that way. That I don't think is really in the card.
Doesn't he, just based off what you've seen this year, feel more inclined to settle in those situations where it's like, even Westbrook would be a good comp here where it's, well, why is he taking that pull-up jumper?
Right. Why the 13-footer? Yeah. No, there's some of that. I do think he can get to the point where the ball, Cunningham is getting all the attention. It swings to Ivy and he has like a single guy that's in rotation to attack. I think he can make the like 2 to 3 dribble decision. Like, I think he can get to a point where, and we don't need to make the incredible skip passes or whatever, but just like, either go all the way and finish, which he can do really well, or just make the simple pass to the open shooter. And now, do the Pistons have guys in their long-term core that are going to make those shots? I don't know. That's another complicating factor. It's just a positive that like now we've moved on to that question, because I do think Ivy's shown enough to suggest he can just be that second guy.
Yeah, and I think also the game is clearly slowed down for him, or he's slowed down himself, which I think helps as well. So I would say I would call myself TBD on whether he's the right running mate for Cade moving forward, but I think that he has the strongest case that he's had in 2+ years.
Oh, yeah, which isn't saying a lot. And he was not exactly set up to succeed. So that's another part of it. He's just like being put in better positions now.
He's also, look, I don't know how many people want to have this discussion. I'm not advocating for it. He's not this front office's guy. He has made himself a more valuable trade asset this season.
That's true.
I've seen a lot of Pistons fans who want Brandon Ingram now, and maybe they just think the cost is so low, but like, you don't actively want Brandon Ingram, Cunningham, Ivy, Sarr, and Holland on your, right? That doesn't have all of those. You're not playing them all together.
Yeah, that's a little crowded to me. And like, frankly, you need to still learn more about Thompson and Holland and like Ivy and Cunningham for that matter. I don't know that Ingram helps you get a lot of good information from those guys.
Well, depending on what the cost is, he's shooting enough threes where I would be at least somewhat tempted.
Maybe, I just wonder. Yeah, maybe. I just wonder if you run into the same problem the Pelicans have, where it's like, yeah, he's a good player. He's going to take up a bunch of shots, and some of them will be threes, maybe not enough. And like, you're just not learning anything about your guys that you want to with him in the lineup. It's a weird phenomenon.
You ready for rapid fire news?
Yes.
Do you have our news doc open, or do you just want me to run through it all?
I got it.
I'll start with the Hawks. Vit Krejci will be reevaluated in the second week of November after suffering a thigh injury.
A lot of injuries in Atlanta. For the Celtics, Jaylen Brown's dealing with a hip flexor. Wednesday's game against Golden State, that's going to happen tonight as we're recording it, will be the third game he's missed.
For the Brooklyn Nets, Trendon Watford, who's yet to play with a hamstring injury, is expected to make his season debut soon, per head coach Jordi Fernandez. I'm excited to see grab-and-go stuff from Trendon Watford. Ben Simmons remains day-to-day with back issues. Noah Clowney remains day-to-day with a hip injury.
For the Bulls, Zach LaVine is expected to miss a second straight game. He's got a thigh issue.
Nick Richards, by the way, I forgot to include this on the doc.
Oh, yeah.
He is going to miss some time for the Hornets with a rib cartilage fracture. They did not give a concrete timetable. He is out indefinitely.
I think they said they were going to reevaluate him every other week, which is okay. That's maybe a little bit.
For Chicago, I'll take them since I don't know.
Oh, no, I did Chicago. You take Dallas.
You did Chicago?
Yeah, Zach LaVine, thigh issue.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me. Dallas. Derek Lively II remains day-to-day with a shoulder issue. Maxi Kleber is still dealing with a hamstring injury. Wednesday, he's not expected to play, so that'll mark his 6th straight absence. And PJ Washington is missing Wednesday's game against the Bulls with a right knee sprain, that doesn't feel necessarily like a one-game injury, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, big one here. Aaron Gordon is going to miss multiple weeks with a calf strain, right calf. Aggravated it against the Raptors this past Monday. And I mean, the hits keep coming. Jamal Murray is in concussion protocols. He's going to miss his 3rd straight game on Wednesday.
Do you think Calvin Booth is like watching the tape from that win over the Raptors in just like a dimly lit room that's locked by himself with sort of like maybe Barry Manilow playing in the background? He saw the kids division coming together.
It's just, real excited. We've already had a couple of these, but man, are we going to litigate the Denver Nuggets like last 3 off seasons a lot this year? I feel like that's just that is going to be a big topic all season.
I didn't include this, but DeAnthony Melton's still out with back stuff for the Warriors. They don't seem to know when he's going to come back, but this one is something to monitor. Steven Adams is still dealing with a right knee issue. He's not expected to play Wednesday. This is for Houston, for anyone who might not know who Steven Adams plays for. He's made 2 appearances so far this season.
For the Pacers, man, torn Achilles number 2, Isaiah Jackson tore his, expected to miss the rest of the season. Follows James Wiseman, same injury, brutal. I mean, that, forget the big man depth is compromised. That just sucks. Like those are 2 massive injuries
it sucks for Jackson because he's in a contract year too.
Yeah, that hurts. Aaron Nesmith is going to miss his 2nd straight game Wednesday, sprained right ankle. Rick Carlisle said he's wearing a walking boot. So make of that what you will. Andrew Nembhard played Monday against the Mavs, but he's still day-to-day, got a sore left knee that has cost him 1 game so far.
For the Lakers, Jared Vanderbilt was spotted practicing with them over the weekend, but he has yet to play this year as he recovers from a right foot injury, and they have not provided a timetable for his return. It doesn't even sound like this was per Kobe Price, who covers the Lakers. The way that it's framed as he was spotted practicing with Lakers makes me think, were you supposed to see that? Like,
yeah, spies in the rafters were able to discern that it was Jared Vanderbilt practicing. Not on here, but Anthony Davis had a foot injury that he played through in his last game, and so anything with Anthony Davis is going to be worth monitoring. I don't know if that's day to day or not. For the Memphis Grizzlies, Marcus Smart has missed the last 3 games. He's got a right ankle sprain. Continues to be listed as questionable. The Grizzlies are just again up and down the rosters. Everybody's hurt.
It's okay. Scottie Pippen Jr. is here to save the day.
He is.
For the Miami Heat, Jaime Jaquez Jr. will miss his 2nd straight game on Wednesday with an illness.
Milwaukee Bucks, stop me if you've heard this before. Chris Middleton is out indefinitely still. He's recovering from dual ankle surgeries. Shams Charania on NBA Today said the Bucks have recognized that this, quote, is taking much longer than they anticipated. Middleton has yet to resume 5-on-5 action on the court. Everything is super great in Milwaukee.
He doesn't fix what's ailing them the most. Either,
it's just like, why not? One more.
We're on to the Pelicans. So Jordan Hawkins missed Monday's game with lower back tightness and remains day-to-day. We already covered the CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, DeJounte Murray absences. Zion Williamson has missed the past 2 games with a quad/hamstring/thigh issue. He remains questionable. And also, whatever's going on with him also seems just a little bit more mysterious than you would like.
Quad and hamstring at the same time, not great.
Thigh, I was trying to dig into it more, and maybe we'll have more information by the time this comes out. So anyone in the comments who's, well, actually, congratulations on existing in the future.
It's just like Zion Williamson, entire leg is fucked. Just out.
Zion Williamson, the Pelicans are cursed, is questionable.
Jesus. All right. For the Knicks, campaign's questionable with a hamstring injury Wednesday. He's missed a game so far. Matt Ryan signed a non-guaranteed deal with the Knicks, who just need human bodies to play.
Legally, they need 14 bodies.
Right. Which is a tough threshold for them to clear. Ariel Hukporti got converted from his two-way to a standard deal. It's non-guaranteed, but it's got and includes a team option. Good for him. He looked pretty good in the few stretches I saw him play.
Oklahoma City, I don't have any injury updates for them, Grant. I just wanted you to know that they still have 0 backup centers available, but continue to own the best adjusted defensive rating in league history. Just
thank you for that. Appreciate it. For the Magic, this has been a few days now, but big deal. Paolo Banchero out indefinitely with a torn oblique. Wendell Carter Jr. is going to miss his second straight game with plantar fasciitis in his left foot. Also just missed a game due to right knee tendonitis.
And also, I would just direct you back to the conversation that Grant led on the Magic after the Paolo injury that we reacted to. I don't know if it was live. It might have been the day after. Orlando's offense is dead last in efficiency since he went down. So
that's a problem.
He's pretty important. For the run of the Philadelphia 76ers, Paul George, Grant, made his season debut versus the Suns on Monday. And it seems like he's going to play against the Clippers on Wednesday. How about it? This is a bigger one. Joel Embiid has received a 3-game suspension for an altercation with the Philly Inquirer's Marcus Hayes. Embiid reportedly shoved, not assaulted or punched or whatever vernacular was going around in the moment. He reportedly shoved Hayes during a heated argument that followed an article Hayes wrote about Embiid's availability, in which Hayes used a since removed reference to Embiid's deceased brother and his son to prove the article's point. Too many people have gotten way into this, but my commentary would be the article itself was typical, like national columnist, like this is what they do. But it was unacceptable that he just invoked needlessly Embiid's son and his brother to prove a point. I thought that was gross. That does not give Joel Embiid the right to push him. Everyone comes off here looking very poorly. However, Embiid's suspension does feel like it's going to begin immediately, and I question whether he was going to play immediately. Yeah. So will there be a follow-up investigation there? But the Philly Inquirer, by the way, they published something that made it seem like they were going to like really follow through with this. I don't know if a lawsuit will file, so it's something to monitor, but I very much believe that we all, for what we say, should have consequences if we come across a player. But the people who were kind of like rah, like, yeah, Embiid pushed him, like, shut the fuck up. Like now you've taken yourself out of 3 games in which your teams need you. Embiid needs to be smarter, but I don't like this idea that we get to say whatever we want about these players. They are humans. And finally, the idea that Embiid is somehow responsible for, let alone faking injuries or doesn't want to play, is just ludicrous. Like that is just dumbassery at its finest.
Yeah. The section of that column was unnecessary and over the line, and Embiid is wrong because don't do violence to words. That's pretty straightforward. For the Spurs here, Jeremy Sohan suffered a fracture in his left thumb during Monday's game against the Clippers. He's going to have surgery. The team's going to provide updates as appropriate. That's going to be, several weeks minimum, right? Devin Vassell, not expected to make his season debut. He's recovering from right foot surgery until the Spurs come back from their current road trip. So his earliest debut is looking like November 7th. We'll see. Also, Greg Popovich away from the team indefinitely, having suffered I forget what the exact phrasing was, like a health situation or something like that. It's all been very vague. The Spurs aren't giving out any details, as which is fine. Popovich is 75. You got to take this stuff seriously. So he's going to be away from the team, I would imagine, for quite a while.
And I really hope ESPN has Shams cease reporting on this, because he's just saying there's a serious concern. And I don't think we need to know the details, because the fact that we know all these like player medicals is awkward enough. But if we don't know what's going on, we don't need to speculate or just throw around terms like serious. Thank you. I did not have that in the doc. Thanks for catching that. The Raptors, we just kind of talked about this, but Kelly Olynyk is still a few weeks away from returning from a back injury. He has yet to play this season. Bruce Brown is not expected back anytime soon following the right knee surgery he underwent in September. And Emmanuel Quickley, who has not played since opening night, remains out with a pelvic injury. It does not seem like he has a concrete timetable for his return.
More time for Gradey Dick and Jonathan Mobo to do cool stuff.
Gradey Dick to do his Jason Tatum impressions. That's right.
That's the comp. For the Jazz, Jordan Clarkson been diagnosed with left plantar fasciitis. He'll be reevaluated at the end of the week after missing what will be a total of 5 games. The rookie Isaiah Collier still out with a right hamstring. too bad because he might be getting some minutes here, given Clarkson's absence. He hasn't played this seaon, Collier. And Lauri Markkanen missed his third straight back issues on Monday. His status for moving forward is unclear. I would expect Lauri Markkanen to miss the odd game here and there throughout the season with back issues or something.
The fact that they're not listing made up body parts, though, does have me a little bit concerned.
Well, maybe they should trot out the what was the Porzingis injury? It was like a reticular tib.
They should just make up. I mean, someone will catch it, but like just name the most complicated, maybe inconsequential, like part of the body, and just have that sore, bruised.
Well, like with Steph Curry's ankle thing, suddenly this is a peroneal tendon strain or something. It's like, all right, we saw his ankle flip over. We don't need to be this precise.
Do you have anything else? Are you ready to take us out of here after we went 25 minutes? We said we were just going to do an hour midweek. We went an hour and 25. You're welcome.
That's all right. We had a lot of Eastern Conference.
We had a lot of dick to get through on this podcast.
Thanks everybody for checking in with us. We'll have another episode going up. I don't know, next Tuesday, Dan, is that the deal? I guess I should have consulted with you before.
We'll have one on Saturday going up.
Saturday. That's right.
Bailed on me this Friday already. Grant's informing you all live. He's not about it.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, rate, review, subscribe. Make sure you comment on YouTube. We've made specific solicitations for comments on this one because we need answers on the Gradey Dick comps. That's an important issue. Please contribute. You can join our Discord and check out our merch. Links for that in the YouTube and podcast description. I think that's going to cover it. Thanks again. Thank you, Dan. Dan, I hope you're doing well. Just to bookend this.
Thank you so much, Grant. You're such a good friend.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Shouts Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.